Roll call shows all 7 city councilors are present.
Thank you. Item 2 is Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 3, a special order of the day and announcements. Tonight we have our proclamation honoring City Clerk Carol Alexander. So at this time I would ask if she would join me at the podium. Before we start, this is an opportunity to really embarrass people as I retire. So, anytime I get an opportunity to embarrass people, I like to take that opportunity. In all seriousness, personally speaking, I would like to thank Carol for her years of service while I've been on the council. A lot of you out there in TV land may think we run a smooth meeting, but it's because of Carol sitting there making faces at us if we're doing something wrong or what we should be doing. So she's one that really helps direct the meetings. She's one that helps remind us where we need to be and what time we need to be there. And I just personally want to thank her for her professionalism and her friendship and her dedication to the city and also to the city council over all these years. So we do have an official proclamation. City of Beloit, Wisconsin, official proclamation honoring Carol S. Alexander's service to the city of Beloit. Whereas Carol Alexander has been employed by the city of Beloit in several capacities beginning in July 1983. And whereas Carol was appointed city clerk in January of 1997, subsequently obtaining certification as a Wisconsin certified professional clerk and master municipal clerk. And whereas during her tenure as city clerk, Carol has earned a reputation both statewide and nationally as a knowledgeable professional, setting high standards of achievement with regard to administering the many functions and duties of the city clerk's office. And whereas Carol was elected as president of the Wisconsin Municipal Clerks Association in 2003, received the WMCA Lifetime Achievement Award, twice fulfilled a term as Region 6 Director for the International Institute of Municipal Clerks, a 26-member board representing 10,000 members worldwide, and has conducted statewide training for municipal clerks on their election responsibilities. And whereas Carol's service to the city, as well as the city's clerk's profession, has been exemplary in every way. Now, therefore, the City Council President of the City of Beloit is hereby proclaimed Saturday, January 8, 2011, as Carol Alexander Recognition Day, and hereby encourages all of the citizens of the City of Beloit to join the City Council and the city's management team in expressing appreciation for Carol's dedication and achievement as an employee, and more specifically, as City Clerk, thanking Carol for her high level of competency and professionalism with which she fulfilled the duties of the office. Further recognizing her service to the city clerk's profession through the many offices held at both the state and international level. And finally, extending congratulations upon the occasion of her retirement and extending the community's very best wishes to Carol with regard to her future endeavors. Presented this third day of January 2011, Kevin D. Levy, City Council President. And before she takes her seat, and she has comments, we have a present for Carol from the City Council. And Councilor Dent will make that presentation.
Carol, I don't think there'd be any way possible that we could adequately express the appreciation that all of us have for the work that you've done and how you've kept us honest and kept the meetings run smoothly. So this is merely a token of our appreciation, but we do hope that you enjoy it as you retire. We did all sign the back of it, and it says, presented to Carol Alexander upon her retirement from the office of City Clerk, City of Beloit, Wisconsin, by the Beloit City Council, January 3rd, 2011. And this is a framed advertisement for one of the oldest businesses in Beloit, which is the Eclipse Windmill Company. Of course, it's still operating at that site under a different name, but it's certainly a fixture in this community for a long, long time, and it's left its impression here just as you have on city government.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much. That's beautiful. When I came to work for the city, my son was in 4th grade, and we went on a field trip to the Beckman Mill event, and I bought a framed picture of downtown Beloit. And that's been in my office this whole time. So this goes with it just perfectly, and I will hang this next to that. It's just the continuity of everything. I've really enjoyed working here. As you know, it's hard to leave, but I'm leaving because I want to, and it's just, I'm anxious to see what's going to happen next with my wonderful husband, Gordy, my family, and I've enjoyed it all. I've been privileged to work with you all. My staff, Judy and Jolene, have been wonderful. Rebecca's going to do a great job as your next city clerk. And it's been all good, and I thank you so much.
And as she takes her seat, item 4 is public hearings. Resolution approving a change in use of the city's home program income in 2008, 2009, and 2010 home dollars. Staff presentation would be by Ms. Christensen.
The Home Investment Partnership Program guidelines allow home funds to be used for homeowner rehab projects and rental rehab projects. However, historically, we've only allocated those home dollars to homeowner projects. The Housing Rehab Program Manual isn't specific related to funding source, so it essentially just sets guidelines for the rental rehab loans. We have, at this point, approximately $230,000 in home program income, which is repayments to the home program, $50,459 in 2008, $95,573 in 2009, and $108,172 in 2010 home dollars. We're not seeing as great a demand for homeowner loans right now with drops in assessed value and some credit issues with people as the economy has shifted. But we are getting requests from our landlords, and so we could use this money to do some more landlord loans. You asked for some of the loan guidelines on the 2 programs at the last meeting, and they're included in the staff report. The owner-occupied loan, there's an owner-occupied low interest and deferred payment loan program. Depending on what your income level is, you may get a deferred loan, or you may get at 0% or an installment loan at 3%. The term of the loan is 10 years with the ability for staff to extend it to 15 years. The rental housing rehab loan program is available to property owners to rehab their rental properties. Currently, it's set at each property owner can receive 1 rental rehab loan per year. We do have a request on the agenda to modify that for a couple of years, but that's where it stands right now. And the maximum loan amount is $20,000 for a single family, $25,000 for a multifamily building, and $8,000 for each additional unit over 2. So essentially $25,000 for a duplex, and then $8,000 additional for each unit over that. The interest rate is 3%. Term is 10 years. These are all repayable loans. We did take this to the CDA, and they did recommend approval of allowing the home funds to be used in this manner.
Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, so at this time, I would reopen the public hearing on this particular item. Is there anyone wishing to speak on item 4A? At this time, if so, please come forward, state your name. Anyone wishing to speak on item 4A? Third and final call, anyone wishing to speak on item 4A? Seeing no one, I would close the public hearing at this time and entertain a motion for approval. Second. Motion by DeForest, second by Van de Bogart. Councilor, discussion? Questions? Councilor Johns?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple quick questions. Are these for the rental loans on a first-come, first-served basis?
Yes.
And one of the things that was brought up during our last time it was in front of council by fellow Councilor Noonan, there was a concern with one property owner maxing out, or taking the majority of it, and I guess I'm looking for possible discussion on putting a max on that 8,000 for the number of units.
I would rather you did that as part of the last item on the agenda, because would just be for home funds, so you'd be putting these restrictions just on these particular home funds. So I'd respectfully ask that you not do it as part of this item, because that is actually in the program manual, and that max, if you do it here, it would just apply to the home program income and the '08 home dollars, the '09, and the 10, and it wouldn't apply to anything else.
Versus doing it later.
Yeah, and the
tonight.
temporary change resolution you could add that to that resolution or modify that resolution to include that. I did ask Christy Harrison, who is our housing rehab financial specialist, if we generally provide a lot of, multi-huge loans like that. And she said, since she's been here, it's been typically 4 units or less. She does know years and years ago, before she worked here, that they did do some larger loans, but that in her experience, the requirements of the loan program make it difficult for the landlords to be able to qualify when they have a big complex, because there are some equity requirements. You have to have some equity in the property, and generally they don't qualify for that. And in the time she's been here, which she's been here longer than I have, so she's been here, I would say, around 15 years, typically it's the 1 to 4 is what we get. We don't usually get the 5 and up. And then there is a cap on that. I mean, you could change that, but, and I think that's why we've never had an issue with, having the dollars be gone. Because we have, on the CDBG side, that ability to just follow that guideline now, and we never, in the last 15 years, we haven't given out a loan for that large of a complex.
Even with the 4, though, we're talking quite a chunk of that total dollar, so.
It would be 25 plus 16, whatever. 41. I'm trying to add in my head.
Yeah. Quick math.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Anyone else have any other questions? Seeing none, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. Item 5 is citizens' participation. We reached a point on the agenda where citizens may come forward and speak on items that's not on the agenda. The counselors will not act on the items. We will probably refer them to the correct department. Is there anyone who would like to speak under citizens' participation at this time? Seeing no one, would close item 5, move on to item 6, which is the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered at this point on the agenda. The consent agenda includes items 6A through 6C. Is there anyone who would like anything removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda. Motion by Johns. Is there a second? Second by Dench. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Item 7 is ordinances. There are none. Item 8, appointments. There are none. Item 9, council activities and upcoming events. Councilor Noonan, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to wish everyone a happy new year, and would like to extend remarks that were mentioned earlier for our great appreciation for Carol Alexander. She does so very, very much for all of us and for so many other people throughout the city and the staff. You'll be greatly missed by very many, but we know that we'll see your friendly face around, and we look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Councilor Johns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just like to extend my gratitude for all of the kindness and patience that you have shown me on this very large learning curve called City Council. I had so much to learn and still do, and you always just showed me everything very patiently, and I'm very grateful.
Councilor Haynes.
I, too, at the risk of abject redundancy, would like to extend my my complete thanks for the resource that you've been and the kind words and helpfulness that you've always extended to members of the council, as myself, no less than any others. Thank you.
Councilor DeForest.
I, I too would like to extend my congratulations and just emphasize, I think one of the most impressive achievements or compliments to Carol's service was when her peers elected to give her a Lifetime Achievement Award. I think that is pretty outstanding. So even among all the city clerks across the country, they decided to bestow that award upon her. So clearly, people far beyond the reaches of Beloit feel as strongly as we do about how spectacular you are. So, and I personally will miss you. You've been a great mentor to me, and I remember the days back in the health department, and we go back a long way. And I just want to thank you for serving the city, serving the residents, and doing it faithfully and patiently and kindly. So thank you so much for all that you've done for them and for me.
Councilor Dent.
Well, of course, I too want to express my personal congratulations on your retirement and personal thanks for the service that you provided, both to me and to everyone else on the council, and also the high degree of professionalism that you brought to the job. I'm sure others before you probably were too, but I just can't imagine someone offering that level of professionalism and expertise and attention to detail that you brought to this job. So again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Councilor Van der Bogart.
The accolades, awards, and compliments are all well-deserved, Carol. Thank you for your hard work and efforts. Not a lot of people probably realize that among your other activities, you generally speaking every day get up and go and exercise at North Point at 5:30 in the morning. And you don't have to do that anymore, that time anyway. So, congrats.
And we're backing up to Councilor Johns.
Thank you, because I forgot to leave out Rebecca. Congratulations on your new position, and you do have really big shoes to fill. No pressure. But my understanding of your shoe passion, I'm sure you'll do very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yet another reason for exercising that I'm always looking for a reason to get out of exercise, and that gym might have been another one at 5 o'clock in the morning. So thanks a lot. But words I can't express enough the appreciation that, as you noted that we have for Carol. In this job, it comes a lot of changing with different council presidents. You never know what you're going to get. She got me this year. She got me this year, and the meetings change, the formats change. Different presidents want to do things a different way, and through the years, I've always noticed Carol would say, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do." That helps a new president a long way, that he does not have to have animosity between the clerk and himself to try to conduct the meeting. So at the beginning of my tenure here, it's like, "Carol, I want to do it this way." And she was like, "Whatever you want me to do is fine." And I count that as an honor and a blessing, because people don't have to be that way. So we think you do an outstanding job. We wish you luck in all your retirement. If Rebecca's ever sick, I'm sure you might want to step in sometime and come in, and she'll be happy for that. But I also want to congratulate, as Councilor John said, Rebecca. She's going to do an outstanding job as well. I've already started asking her questions and calling her and saying, "Now, where am I supposed to be next week?" So she's going to be fine as well. But I just want to give Carol her accolades and for a job well done through the years. You're going to be missed, but we greatly appreciate your service. At this time, we would move on to item 10, City Manager's presentation, Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Assessment presentation by Ms. Jacobson.
You're a tough act to follow. Good evening. As you know, Shaw Environmental and Infrastructure recently studied many of the city's facilities and processes, and the full report was attached to your agenda this evening. I know it was kind of lengthy. Tonight, Bill Haas, he's the Director of Energy Programs at Shaw, is here to give an overview of his study. Feel free to ask him technical questions during his presentation. Afterwards, I can, myself or Larry can fill you in on what the Sustainability Committee discussed, but Bill can probably answer most of your technical questions at this point.
Thank you for the introduction, and good evening to everyone. The purpose of my short presentation today is really to provide you with a high-level background of the report that's in front of you. I understand that in the interest of everyone's time, I'm really going to hone in on the key points of that assessment and provide you with the knowledge and scope that is in that assessment so you can make decisions that you may be presented moving forward. So the renewable energy and energy efficiency assessment was conducted at 10 municipal facilities in November of last year. First time I've actually said that, of 2011. And based on several criteria, we identified buildings that would be well suited for various renewable energy projects. We performed financial analyses of example projects. And we also conducted walk-through energy audits of those 10 facilities and made recommendations for those facilities from an energy efficiency perspective as well. Backing up just a little bit, renewable energy is energy that is generated using natural resources at a facility specifically, whereas energy efficiency is reducing the amount of energy that's used within a facility. One of the most important things, I think, and it's a credit to everyone here and everyone in the city, is our engineers, when they went to all the facilities and spoke with the staff, they realized that the city is operating at a very high level of energy efficiency. And most municipal facilities that we go into when we do this type of assessment, that is not the case. So I think first I want to say that there's a credit to everyone here and the public, the council, all the city employees for really making sustainability and energy efficiency a focus, because not only does it provide environmental benefits, it provides significant cash flow benefits to the city. And that way you can do what cities do best, and that's provide services to the public. So we did conduct those energy audits, but it was a walk-through energy audit, not a detailed energy audit. And we identified also some, what we call the low-cost, no-cost, the low-hanging fruit energy efficiency opportunities that are available as well. The facilities that we evaluated were the City Hall and Police Station, this facility, the Fire Department Headquarters, Station number 2 and number 3, the club, the Public Works, the Activity Center, the Transit Headquarters, the Grinnell Memorial Hall, and the Utilities and Engineering Building. Any other facilities were not conducted as part of the scope of this study. They may have energy efficiency improvements and may be beneficial for renewable energy, except they're outside of the scope of this study. So diving right into the renewable energy assessment. First, we looked mainly at wind energy and solar energy. You'll find in the report that we looked at some other technologies as well, but the recommendations that are provided and the most cost-effective and I think the best value that the city will get in terms of cost savings, in terms of implementation and the time frame of implementation with regards to the energy efficiency and conservation block grant funds, as well as public visibility and education opportunities. We focused on wind energy and solar energy. For the wind energy assessment, we first looked at the high level. We looked at several years of wind speed data that has been collected for areas near Beloit, which is then presented in what's called a windrose, which is the chart that you see on the left. And what the windrose shows is it provides an idea of the wind energy potential and, over the course of a year, what is the prevailing direction that that wind is coming from. And then that nation, we found that on a given site in the city, over 13% of the wind, so 13% of the potential energy that would hit that site, is coming from a southerly direction. And as such, we looked at a southern exposure for those facilities with regards to wind energy potential. If the southern exposure was blocked, that would mean that the greatest potential for energy generation at those facilities or at those sites would be blocked by some impediment. So that would make it not as likely a candidate for wind energy as opposed to some of the other technologies that we were looking at. So using that information and looking at unobstructed locations, the wind energy projects that we recommend are for the engineering utilities building, the public works building, and the transit building, mainly because they have large unobstructed locations with access to the resource, and also they're visible to the public. And I think with renewable energy, since it does not pay for itself on its own, you're not going to solve all of the energy problems for the city of Beloit or the country or the world by installing solar panels or wind energy. There is a point where the payback reaches a level that is not cost effective, but that equation may change, and it may change for you, it may change for the city employees, it may change for the public based on the education and the other benefits. So we looked at the public visibility as well. And with that, and it was outside of the scope of this study, the area south of the Beloit wastewater treatment facility also has an unobstructed access to the wind resource, and it is a highly visible location. So you may get the sort of double bang for your buck there with a publicly visible project that also provides adequate access to the resource. We looked at two different options for wind energy generation. The first, and I'll show you a picture on the next slide, is what's called a vertical axis turbine. The difference between a vertical axis turbine and a horizontal axis turbine is the windmill that you're thinking of in your head is a horizontal axis turbine. It looks like the propeller of a prop airplane, and it rotates like this, and they're typically mounted very high up in the air. Recommended at least 70 to 80 feet, so think 7 to 8 stories. Think of the size of this building in height. So that's option B, which would be a 20 kilowatt, that's a measure of capacity unit, versus 8 vertical axis. Now the vertical axis, as opposed to operating like a propeller on an airplane, are actually situated like up and down vertically, and they rotate like a corkscrew. They don't provide as much energy generation. However, they don't need to be mounted 8 or 9 stories in the air, and are also then a better option for areas where you may not want to have a large tower. And we've seen them often installed in more urban and suburban locations as opposed to more rural and country locations that you need to do for the larger option. You can see the estimated costs of implementation. And you'll note that what we did for the 20 kilowatt versus 8 of the 1.2, which gives you 10. So you're looking at approximately option A being half the overall capacity and energy generation of option B. And it shows you then the simple payback. In our analysis, we also identified other grants that are available. These are not grant funds that the city of Beloit has through the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. These are other state and federal programs that you may be able to also apply to, and therefore leverage those block grant dollars that you have further, get more bang for your buck. This is an image depicting the vertical axis turbines at, actually this is a Devon Bank, which is on the, it's a northwest suburb of Chicago in Wheeling. And here they have an installation of 5 of the units. And you can see sort of in the background of the image some larger trees, and then you can also see a newly planted tree closer to the foreground or in the midground. So it gives you an idea of the perspective of scale and size. These are about 18 feet in height as opposed to the others. Moving on to solar, we also looked at the potential for solar energy generation at the 10 facilities that we visited. Much like wind, solar energy projects rely on their exposure to their resource, an unobstructed exposure, and in this case the resource is the sun. There are 2 types of solar that we looked at. The first is PV, or photovoltaic. That is the type of technology that takes the energy from the sun and converts it through a chemical process into electricity. And then the other process or technology that we looked at is solar thermal, which takes the solar radiation from the sun and then uses that to create heat and then transfers that heat to a process that is heat intensive to offset some of the energy use. And you'll see that in a minute where we offset the domestic hot water use at a facility. Both technologies, PV and solar thermal, are impacted by the height at which the panels are mounted in relation to other obstructions. Think shade, trees and buildings, and also the angle at which the panels are mounted with regards to the movement of the sun across the sky. And that is optimized at 42 degrees in this location because that catches the most intense radiation from the sun as the sun does track throughout the seasons and throughout the year. And we found that several of the buildings and facilities evaluated ranked very well regarding their exposure to the sun. meaning they probably have some large open roof space, and the roof space is at an exposure that is higher than surrounding obstructions that would create shade on those panels. And they also offered that right southerly exposure at the correct angle. What was interesting, and you'll see an image of it next, is we found that solar photovoltaic is ideally suited for this facility, the City Hall and the police station. The solar thermal energy project is recommended for Fire Station number 1, and both of these recommendations have excellent access to the resource, appropriate energy demand for the technology, and also high public visibility, which I mentioned before when we were talking about the wind energy technology. For the PV system analysis, we modeled a 30 kilowatt system, looked at the estimated implementation cost of that system, with a payback again with grants that could be obtained, and these grants are from the state of Wisconsin and the federal government outside of the energy efficiency and conservation block grant dollars that you have. And then also the simple payback of the solar thermal system. So respectively, it's 18.8 years for that sized system, and the solar thermal system is 30-year payback for that size system. And I mentioned something that was interesting is we found in our evaluation this facility, when it was designed and constructed in the early 80s, was actually constructed with the idea of putting solar PV panels mounted on the rooftop. And I've circled that area in red where solar PV panels could be mounted. On the vertical part of the building, which is outside of the capacity that we looked at, you could also mount thin film panels. And then on the flat roofs areas where the building is stepped would be ideal for rack-mounted panels, as you can see in the top right corner. And the thin film that I just mentioned is in the top left. So based on the fact that this building and the designers and architects of this building had the foresight for renewable technology in the early 80s, which is quite impressive, we recommend that this building, with its southerly exposure being essentially solar ready, would be an ideal location for solar installation, especially with the high public visibility here downtown and the familiarity of this building with the city and city operations. Just going to go over a little bit of the energy efficiency assessment itself. I pulled a couple of facilities that had some larger improvements, and I'm not going to go into each of them in detail because it gets a little bit technical, but I think the overall message is that even though the city has made great strides with regards to energy efficiency, there's always a little bit more that can be done, and at times the little bit more may be no cost or low cost, or just general maintenance things that may have been overlooked, and not from a lack of knowledge from the building operations staff, but the fact that some of this information is just more highly specialized. So I'm going to fly through these, but we can go back if you want more detail. Looking again at City Hall and Police Station, for example, we could increase the energy efficiency of the envelope through a high-performance window film and shading devices, and then getting at some of those more technical recommendations that get into the low cost or no cost. For example, the economizer outside air temperature set point should be at 70 degrees Fahrenheit for this climate, and it will take advantage that way of more free cooling, essentially pulling in outside air when it has that set point, so you can use that air to recirculate and use that air to cool the building, and it's actually an ASHRAE, which is a code recommendation for this area. It's actually right now set at 50 degrees, so that is one of those things where it's as easy to have the building operations staff verify that there's not some other reason that the set point was moved down. Somebody may remember, oh, it doesn't work anymore, or something along those lines, and then just change the setting back. Also, the supplier temperature set point could be increased, and having your HVAC contractor or even your building operations maintenance folks take a look and compare what the set point is to what the recommendations are for this climate zone and for the types of equipment that you have. And looking at, since this is an older facility, recommissioning of the mechanical systems is also recommended. It's an opportunity. Recommissioning is much like taking your car in for a tune-up. You buy a car, and after a couple of years, it needs to go in and get the plugs changed and the wires changed, maybe a new distributor cap and whatnot. The same thing with the mechanical systems of a building. Sometimes there's things that need to be adjusted, and it's not the whole car, it's not the whole engine, but it might be the wires and the plugs, same type of analogy. So there's different things that can be done to building systems, and after 25, 30 years, those systems get a little bit out of whack and they need to just be tuned up, and you can actually get great efficiency from those opportunities. Similarly, as I said, we're looking at the clubhouse, adding insulation to accessible roof spaces where there is none, high-performance films on the windows, insulating ductwork that passes through unconditioned spaces where you're having significant loss of heat as it passes through a space that's unconditioned on a night like tonight. In most cases, in most facilities, we found that the programmable thermostats were programmed and they were operating correctly. This is one of the facilities where they were not. It's you know, that hold button that you guys have at home. And if you're paying attention to your thermostats at home, you always get frustrated when somebody hits the hold button and leaves it on 72 degrees when nobody's in the house in the middle of winter. Same type of thing here, just a simple change looking at the thermostats. Domestic hot water pipes should be insulated so you don't lose heat from those pipes. An automatic flue damper, essentially the hot water flue can close and open so you're not bringing in outside air when you don't need the flue pipe open. And insulating the hot water tank. Again, these all seem very simple, but they have been overlooked in the past, and they would be a significant opportunity to make some energy efficiency improvements and start saving a little bit on the utility bills for these facilities. Similar things with hot water and insulation at the Public Works facility. The Memorial Hall, the windows and doors, this is a more capital-intensive type of improvement, are in extremely poor condition, and they should be replaced. The exhaust dampener that I mentioned on the solar hot water tank in the previous facility, same type of deal. And installing rigid insulation with a radiant barrier behind all the radiators that will radiate the heat back out into the rooms, and you're not losing half of the heat through the building envelope and through all those windows. And looking at some significant mechanical changes in this facility, since it is an older facility, but it's also one that I think needs some care. It's a beautiful facility, so it just needs a little bit of work, but that's more on the capital side of things. Transit building, again, we're looking at similar work on the envelope and some simple to larger and more capital-intensive mechanical changes. And again, you sort of see the theme here, finding opportunities for insulation, finding opportunities to change set points to where they should be, to commission those systems properly, make sure those systems are working properly. And this is another one where, you know, perfect example, the hot water system set point is very high. Now, it's possible that because of the use and function of that building, they need extremely hot water, disinfectant or cleaning or whatever it may be. However, that's one of those where you have a conversation with the employees at the facility, who's using the hot water and for what temperature do they need it for, and you can not keep those boilers running at such a high temperature all the time. So in summary, and then we can move to questions if you have any. There are several cost-effective renewable energy and energy efficiency project opportunities here in the city of Beloit. Excuse me. You will always find that efficiency before renewables. Efficiency is always a better payback. However, with the energy efficiency and conservation block grant dollars, I think this is a time where it may change the equation towards renewables, because efficiency doesn't need to stand on its own when there are grant dollars available from the federal government. It gives you an opportunity to not rely on the payback of these improvements alone, but to program these block grant dollars into something that will pay back and does also have other public benefits. But that being said, low-cost energy efficiency projects should not be overlooked. They're easy to do, they're low cost, and they provide an almost immediate return on investment. And then using the provided payback calculations and in the report and other analyses, the more capital-intensive energy efficiency projects should also be included in future budget and planning discussions. So with that.
Any questions? Councilor DeForest.
Yes, thank you for the report. I'm especially interested in one of the recommendations that that you didn't mention in your report, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about, and that's the effluent tie-in or the heat dump.
Sure.
Do you have any estimates of how much that would cost to make the building modifications necessary? We are looking at a future remodeling of this building, and so I'm just wondering, just ballpark, what you're thinking that might cost.
Our engineers, as part of the study, did look at that, and they did determine that the effluent tie-in was feasible. It would require a detailed study to determine the cost effectiveness of the effluent tie-in versus a traditional geothermal system. To put it very plainly, what is the cost of tying this building into the effluent, which is sort of across the way, and trenching and digging up the road and getting to the effluent, versus making a couple puncture wells right here in the parking lot? And what then you're looking at is essentially the cost of trenching, the cost of piping, the length of the tubing within the effluent tie-in. So I would say that when we looked at it, we determined it to be feasible. It was outside of the scope and the resources that we were provided to do the full engineering estimate to give you it will cost you X versus a traditional geosystem with horizontal trenches, vertical wells, and what is the comparison? Because really, while it is a very interesting opportunity and a unique system approach, what it's going to come down to, at least in my opinion and in my recommendation, would be what's the cost of that versus doing a traditional geosystem, because you're using the same equipment within the facility to heat and cool the building.
I have another question, if that's
Go
right,
ahead.
Mr. President.
Go ahead.
I appreciated the estimates that you gave about the payback, the return on investment estimates. How comfortable do you feel with those? Are those, what kind of window are we really looking at? I mean, when you say 30 years, how many, factors maybe could play in that could greatly alter that? I mean, obviously, those are payback estimates made with the assumption that we would receive grants that are available. Are there any other factors that maybe are variables that we would need to consider when we look at those payback estimates?
When you look at the payback estimates, you should first look at the system capacity, because the payback could change based on if you're looking at a 30 kilowatt system versus a 15. You just reduced the size of the system by half, but depending on the type of technology, you may not necessarily be equally diminishing the production. You may reduce the size of the system by half, but you may actually reduce the energy generation by more than half. So that is one thing to consider. I also, though, will say that all of the payback estimates are using more conservative numbers, not our most conservative numbers, but more conservative numbers in our models that we've done. And they'll be pretty close if you were to install that exact system. Also, though, like any estimate, is project costs. We estimated project costs based on similar installations that we've done in similar locations. However, solar, let me just pick an example. The roof penetrations for a solar PV system may encounter some problem with the roof membrane, and then that was completely unforeseen. We did not evaluate the structural, the life of the roof and the roof membrane, so maybe that would be an added cost. So there is some risk in those payback assessments, but I think you'll be able to use the information provided in the report to at least give direction on the types of systems you would like to explore more thoroughly. And then when you put that out for bid, you'll have a much better idea of the cost of the installation, and maybe it's a request for qualifications or some other type of bid process that you use to sort of get ideas of cost first before moving forward.
Can I ask one other question, clarification? This is in specific regard to the solar paneling on the rooftop here, because it seems to be one of the most promising possibilities for renewable energy. Do you have a sense of the integrity of the roof and its ability to sustain the weight of the panels? Can we assume the angles really are at the optimum? I mean, great foresight, but do they really know the angles to? I don't want to, offend anyone, but I just want to make sure that there aren't some inherent assumptions that maybe we can't assume.
I would say from the scope of our assessment, it does look like the angle is appropriate. And the angle doesn't always have to be perfect as well. So if they're off by a degree or two, which would be very small in terms of a change in energy production, that wouldn't be an issue. Also, We did not look at the building from a structural engineering perspective. However, there were no concerns that our engineers raised when viewing the facilities. And one of the folks that was doing the assessment is a professional engineer, so if he did see something, he would have raised it, just like things like economizer, set points, and the like. He probably would have said, you guys have a really big problem, you might want to start looking at that. So I would say that, like you mentioned, that is probably one of the better options, is the solar here. And also, just to say another point on that, what's interesting about it is you'll be able to use a panel installation on the roof setbacks, and then a thin film on the sort of angled areas. Right. So it's a nice demonstration as well, because you have two different technologies, and you could look at bidding those out with separate metering, so that you can show the difference in energy production from the two types of technology, even though they're at same day, same sun. And then also I would recommend that when you do, if you do move forward with this type of project, that you look at including educational components. Often there's a lot of great programs, and some here in Wisconsin as well, that will make that data real-time available on websites at schools, and then schools can use it as a laboratory to access the data from City Hall, and then they can do various analyses in a similar fashion to what we actually did for this assessment, just a little bit simpler.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Randy Bogart?
Thank you. I apologize, sir. I missed, your name is what?
Bill Haas.
All right, Bill. First of all, let me pass on the compliment that you gave to Noble Rose and Jerry Orr. They were the architects that designed the building, and a number of years ago I had my law office in their building. They were my landlords. Jerry Orr is still in town, Noble isn't, but I'm pretty certain we could find out the exact angles if we really needed to by talking to Jerry. Saying that, can you give us I don't know if you describe it as an equation or a hierarchy of decision-making, with the ball moving so quickly in the renewable in terms of efficiency of wind generation, PV generation. We make assumptions as to the costs, but you also make assumptions as to the efficiency of these systems. The systems today that you took this snapshot on were designed 5 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever, and they certainly aren't as efficient as they were, or more, excuse me, they're more efficient than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. You're talking payback times of 20 or 30 years. How do we make an intelligent decision as a public body, stewards of the public money, to pull the trigger at any particular point when this moving train is getting more efficient and better all the time? How do we approach that? How do we make that decision?
That's an extremely good question, and I appreciate you raising it. First, I would say that it's not in the area of the efficiency gains that we're seeing a lot. Wind technology, the efficiency gains, we haven't really seen. On solar, they're creeping up incrementally, but what we are seeing, and where you are very correct, is the cost.
Yeah, the Chinese are making this stuff now, yeah.
Exactly. They, again, with wind, we're not seeing the costs go down as quickly because it's a copper spun generator that turns. It's a technology that is very similar to possibly the advertisement that was gifted earlier in the meeting today. Actually the structure hasn't changed much for the windmills either, except for the vertical mount. But with solar, I can say that 8 to 10 years ago, we were looking at about $10 per watt installed. 10 years later, we're looking at $6. So yes, that is significant movement. And would that $4 have made a difference 10 years ago for some installations, and does it change the payback equation? Yes, it does. I think you need to weigh the potential of solar panel prices coming down as the cost of silicon goes down with the availability of the block grant funds, which also have their own terminus and expiration date to it. And that's a decision I cannot make for you. But in my opinion, I doubt we will see significant movement by greater than $1 per watt installed in the next year to 18 months in silicon prices, which then would translate into the installed capacity per watt of solar.
Thank you.
Councilor Daines?
Couple of questions. First of all, if we're talking about geothermal system at this site, Does the proximity to the river and the fact that the water table, the proximity to the water table underground, does that mitigate at all as far as the installation, the depth that you have to go, the stability of the temperature that's down there? Or is that not a factor? Does it make more sense to do it here than at some other site further away from the river?
You know, it really is only a factor of proximity to a resource. Geothermal installations, there's 3 types of geothermal installations. There's 2 big categories, closed loop and open loop. A closed loop runs a fluid, like an antifreeze, through a closed loop and runs it through a substrate where it can dump heat or grab heat and then pull it into a system that can change that heat and that temperature differential into heating or cooling. So closed and open. Open would just use river water or pond water or lake water if it doesn't freeze, where a closed loop would run it through that substrate. Outside of closed or open, and open needing water, the closed loop can run through any substrate that holds a constant temperature. So after about 8 feet in depth, the soil that this building is situated on will hold a constant temperature of about 52 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. It's sort of we don't have many of them here in Wisconsin, but it's why caves are always, warm in the winter and cool and damp in the summer. So going to the river versus just going straight down versus going down 6 feet and laying a horizontal length of tubing really won't impact the efficiency of the system. It's really just cost and then access to that resource. And that sort of gets to the question raised by the councilwoman earlier, which is what is the cost of going to the effluent pipe versus drilling straight down here and puncturing the relatively new asphalt parking lot versus doing horizontal trenches, which would impact that new parking lot more, and then what is the cost of repaving?
And then another question regarding particularly wind, but to a smaller degree solar. When you're doing the payback estimates, do maintenance costs factor in? Are you strictly working with the acquisition costs?
We're looking strictly at the acquisition, installation, and then the obtaining grants that the city is eligible for.
Okay, and there are a lot of unknowns, I would assume, as far as maintenance cost. And if you're looking at a payback of 35 years on something, some of these technologies haven't been around 35 years. We can't know for sure what kind of a life expectancy they would have. The bearings might need to be replaced from time to time.
I would think, first, you're absolutely right. On wind, there are more moving parts, and utility scale and some of the smaller ones definitely would need some maintenance, and I've seen maintenance on projects after about 10 to 15 years. Again, depends on the product, depends on the quality of the product, the quality of the installation. On solar PV, it's a little bit different because there's no moving parts. And over time, there is a decrease in efficiency. That decrease starts to kick in at about 15 years and then goes down slightly moving forward from there. But you're absolutely right, and as you pointed out, after about 25 years, the studies sort of drop off because the technology hasn't been around that long, and those 25-year studies are on 25-year-old PV crystalline technology, which is like monocrystalline, and we're now at polycrystalline, or it's on monocrystalline, and we're looking at thin film. So you're absolutely right that there are some unknowns in those technologies. But I would also say that it is not, these aren't brand new technologies either.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. If there are no more questions for Mr. Haas, I would like to take a couple minutes and summarize a discussion that we had at the staff level with our Sustainability Committee a few weeks ago that I think will provide at least some suggestion or recommendation as to how we move forward from this point. As Mr. Haas indicated, the city has about $150,000 remaining in a federal allocation for an energy block grant, which would be used in addition to the grant sums that are articulated in these various tables. The city over the last 2 years has also set aside some general purpose funding for sustainability projects in our capital budget. So we have a number of resources available to move forward with these projects that seem to be the most cost effective. Let me just quickly mention where we're at in the discussion point on wind. At this point in time, we're recommending to defer a decision on wind. Council will recall that this past session, the state legislature adopted new state regulations regarding wind turbines, and that the Public Service Commission was given most of the oversight control of that process. They are in the final stages now. We've already reviewed 2 drafts of proposed regulations. Those regulations will be coming out shortly. When those regulations are announced, there will be some discretion within those regulations for how local communities can control and manage the installation of wind turbines, verticals and horizontals, within their community. That will necessitate an amendment to the city's zoning ordinance. And that process involves an open public discussion. It'll go to the Plan Commission. There'll be public hearings there. It'll come back to council. There'll be public hearings here, and then council will set what will become the community standard for what kinds of wind turbines, both vertical and horizontal, how high they're going to be allowed to go, et cetera, in the community. And then we can come back and revisit doing one or the other of these on a city-owned facility. And as you know, the horizontal turbines, which are only, or the vertical turbines, excuse me, which were only about 18 feet high, had a very, very unfavorable payback period. We were looking at 72 years to recover the cost, which is obviously way beyond the lifespan of the potential equipment. And the other ones, the horizontals, which are the ones that you see most often today used, are very tall. They would be 7 to 8 stories high, 75 feet, somewhere in that magnitude. So you're talking about a significant obstruction in the skyline. And obviously, I think it would be wise to wait until this community standard is set, because if we install one of these, you can anticipate applications coming in from other property owners, and we might start to get a proliferation of structures of that height in different parts of the community. So it might be wise to go through that zoning process first, and then double back and revisit wind at a later date. Now, as far as the solar goes, the photovoltaic installation on the City Hall shows a lot of promise. We did do preliminary validation that it would fit, that the angles were right, and that there was room for all of this. Obviously, before we would bid anything, there would be a design engineering phase, and the roof loadings and all of that stuff would be validated during that design engineering phase. But to make the project really work well and to have a reasonable payback period, if you do the entire piece, which would be to put the film on and also to install the panels on that first floor roof over the top of the police station, has about an 18.8-year payback. It's $111,000 total cost, which of course would all be grant funded. And that's, again, a project on a building that would also be a good demonstration project. Part of what we're doing here is we're trying to demonstrate to our community that these things are practical, that they're realistic, that they work. The other thing that you're doing with this is you're also positioning the community going forward in terms of energy costs, because right now these cost estimates are based on current projected energy costs. No one knows for sure what's going to happen in the future, and if energy goes up sharply, as some people have predicted, then the city would be well positioned to be able to heat and cool these buildings as cheaply as possible. So our first recommendation was to move ahead with the photovoltaic installation on City Hall, following the model on Table 2.2, which was the $111,000 project with about an 18-year payback. The second recommendation was 2.3, the solar. That one had a longer payback, a 30-year payback, but it's a relatively simple technology. As you'll recall, the consultants are recommending this be installed on the fire station headquarters, and that's where all the laundry facilities are located for the fire department. So everything from turnout gear to rags to shop towels to uniforms are laundered at that facility, and it's a very, very high volume hot water user. So even though it has a little bit longer payback, it's only a $15,000 cost to put it in. So it's a relatively minor item, and we would recommend that that be the second project that we do immediately, and once again, there will be some more detailed engineering plans prepared. So those would be the two, we'll call them demonstration projects. We would do Generation 1 under the recommendations in this report. We'd hold on the wind and come back on that in a few months once we get this community standard in place. Now, the energy audit stuff, Mr. Haas told you a lot about what they found at all of these facilities. One of the first things we did when we got their report, Shaw's report, is we sat down, distributed this to the management team, and all of our facilities managers went to work. So a lot of that kind of stuff, checking HVAC systems, replacing windows, doing minor repairs and upgrades on city facilities is either, and much of it's already been done, and others are underway. So that's being taken care of. There was the one facility that Mr. Haas identified that we also noted needed a substantial energy upgrade, and that was the Grinnell Memorial Hall. And council is aware, obviously, that that's a heritage building in the city. It was built in 1937, so it has some special value and meaning to the city beyond being a domicile for our senior citizen program. So we're looking at that as being a building, number one, that the community would want to keep no matter what the future held. It's a building we would want to preserve, and therefore would certainly be one that would be worth spending some money on. And number two, we have every intention of it remaining as our senior citizen center for an indefinite period into the future. So the third recommendation in terms of doing a significant cost energy efficiency project now would be to do that one. We've got staff looking at this already. We may need to use a consultant to help us with some of the HVAC redesign for the building, that sort of thing, but that's being worked on. And that would be the third major project. And again, the smaller energy audit stuff is just being done as part of our normal maintenance routines. A lot of it's already been cared for. So those are the three projects we're recommending be undertaken at this time. Obviously, we would use all the energy block grant funds up and the grants identified in this report first, and then fall back on the capital budget if need be to finish those three initiatives. Council, in discussion tonight, you don't need to take any formal action tonight. If you're concurrent with that recommendation, we'll just press on. These will all come back to you once the plans are completed. We'll bid them. They'll all come back for final review for council and a sign off that you're okay with cost and everything before we award bids and move forward with installation.
Councilor Johns?
Thank you. It was a very great summary, Mr. Arf. Thank you. A couple questions as far as this grant money. Are we able to use this grant money to do some of the smaller items that are also recommended instead of just the major projects?
You are, but there are very, very strenuous reporting requirements for every dime of this money you spend. There are two separate websites that have forms on them that must be completed for every expense. And so we found that it generally makes more sense administratively to try to use grant funds for some of the bigger projects, and then use, other funds, our own funds, for some of the smaller stuff. Beth, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we have a $150,000 grant. Half of that, I can't remember if it's not exactly half, 75, but half of that is being used by Public Works for this hydrogen project, which I think you guys are all well aware of. That's kind of rolling. So the other half can be used for projects such as this. And then in addition to that money, we have these other grants that are available through the state. And so that's how we would fund the type of projects we talked about today.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I just think we need to think about this a little bit before we start jumping into $150,000 projects. I appreciate all the work that's been done. These are great recommendations and great ideas. And I'm all for sustainability. I see all this other stuff that we need to tackle as well. The insulation on these buildings and that type of stuff. I'm just real hesitant to move forward on this. Thanks.
Please don't defer too long. We're a number of months down the road on expensing that block grant money. So
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that the money
committee will be happy to-
for the hydrogen project can only be used for hydrogen based on the grant that we received. And then the other half can only be specifically used for sustainability projects. And so it's sort of, if we run out of time, then we lose it. It's not from the general fund or anything. It's separate grant money that we only receive if we in fact spend it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor DeForest?
I would just like to comment that I'm excited to see us, so to speak, put our money where our mouth is. We're an eco-municipality, and we have this grant funding available specifically earmarked for sustainability efforts. So I say we move full speed ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Haynes?
I would like to concur with Councilor DeForest. I think it's generally we need to, move through the planning stages for this. While, we can stop this at any point if it looks like it's untenable, I think that we definitely want to move to the next stage in planning.
Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else?
As I indicated, Council, this does have to come back to you for individual decisions on each project. What we'll do then is go ahead and get our design plans done. We'll get some bids and we'll bring them back to council. And if the prices look reasonable, then we can press on. And if not, we'll move on to another project.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention.
So I'm just to summarize that, I'm just assuming that, never assume, but I think there's pretty much general consensus with the few dissensions that we need to move forward with this project, or at least go down the road, and as we say, as the city manager said, he's going to report back to us at every step of the way anyway, let us know, so we can, as Councilor Haynes said, can kind of stop if we see where it's going to be too costly. But I think it's okay for staff to move down that road. All right, thank you. Item 11, 11A, please.
Item 11A is a resolution affirming local support for housing tax credit application by Keystone Development for rehabilitation of Countryside Village apartments located at 2101 Freeman Parkway.
Thank you. Staff presentation, Ms. Christensen, please.
Keystone Development is here tonight, and I will just say a little bit about it, and then I'll ask them to come up, because I see they have some drawings with them. They have submitted an accepted offer to purchase the property located at 2101 Freeman Parkway, which is known as Countryside Village Apartments, and has developed a plan to rehabilitate the site, the interior of the units, the exterior of the buildings, and to construct a community center and detached garages by using Section 42 housing tax credits from WIDA. The application to WIDA does have a form to either have the local government affirm its support for the project or not. They get points for the support of the project. Included in your packet is a letter from them, as well as some of the forms that are included with the WIDA application, and there's a summary of the scope of work, as well as some elevation drawings. As you can see, that they're looking to do some major rehabilitation on the site, as well as modifications to replacing the parking lots, doing some sidewalks, some landscaping, and as you know, we've had a number of issues with the current owner, or the former owner, I guess, because the bank has taken possession. There's been a number of citations issued, and so from my perspective at least, it would be nice to see improvement made on the site, and Keystone Development is proposing some major modifications that I think would be improvement to this site. I don't know if you guys wanted to come down. Callan Schultz, and I forgot the other person's name.
And I'll ask as you step forward that you repeat your name and address as you get to the mic, please.
Cal Schultz, 420 South Kohler Street, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, 54902.
Andy Dumke, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, 54901.
Our plan for this project is twofold. One is the redoing of the exterior and the site plan, and then redoing of the interior of the units. As you know, there's considerable problems with the units. There's a mold problem. We've gone through with architects and with contractors and have come up with a plan to redo the exteriors of the building. These are the existing flats. They will pretty much remain the same. We'll replace the siding, the roofing, the windows, the doors. On the townhouse units, we've taken off the mansard roof and went to a pitched roof. Again, new windows, doors, siding, a complete envelope redo of the building. On the interiors, on the units where we have a mold problem, that will be, the drywall will be stripped down to the studs. It will be sprayed, cleaned up, and then re-drywalled. In each of the units, there'll be new cabinets, countertops, flooring. They'll all be painted, light fixtures, really a complete rehab of the interiors of the units. On the site plan, what we've done is to add another entrance off Winchester here added a clubhouse, a number of garages, a new playground area, and then landscaping. We added berming along where the single-family units are to hide the project from them. The sidewalks are all being completely torn out and replaced, new asphalt, new light fixtures, and then a comprehensive landscaping of the project. What we're asking for tonight is your support. As it was stated, the support of the city is key in getting the tax credits. We have to compete for these tax credits, as you may know, and there is a considerable demand out there for the credits. And so your support is certainly necessary for us to move forward with this. Questions?
Can I get a motion for approval first to get it on the floor? Motion by DeForest. Is there a second? Second by Dent. Any councilor questions or comments? Councilor DeForest.
I just wanted to check, and maybe Ms. Christensen would need to answer this question. WIDA requirements, is the original developer required to retain their property for 10 years, 15 years?
The tax credits run for 15 years.
Okay.
So that's the compliance, the initial compliance period.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Johns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for your presentation tonight and your interest in Beloit. We appreciate that. I just have to make a comment, have to get it off my chest, so you have to bear with me. It's nothing against you. For one, I'm not a fan of large apartment complexes. This specific location is the case in point, because when they go bad, this is what we get. So I tend not to be a big fan of them. However, in this situation, this one is already there, and I fear that continuing for the city to deal with the present situation is only going to continue to cost us more money. We touched briefly on demolition costs and stuff. And I'm always a proponent of recycling properties within the city. So because this is already there and it is such an eyesore, I do want to extend my support for this resolution. Thank you.
Councilor Haynes.
Yes, I have a question. I know these tax credits are highly competitive, and we've seen many projects fall through for the lack of being able to get those tax credits. So if you take possession of this and you don't get the tax credits, where does that put us?
Back to square one. You know, our intent is to purchase the property after obtaining the tax credits.
So your offer to purchase at this point is contingent on getting the tax credit?
Yeah, our offer to purchase has a number of contingencies in them. We're still waiting for court approval from the bankruptcy court. We have a number of environmental contingencies. We have a tax credit contingency. So yes, we have a number of items that still have to fall into place.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Randy Bogart.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Schultz, a couple questions. First, how did you determine the mix of 104 units at 50 or 60% and only 8 at market rate? How did you determine that mix?
It goes by the scoring. Each project is scored on different things. We're able to maximize our scoring by having more 50% CMI units than we do.
All right, so that's basically your decision to
Yes.
try and increase the scoring?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have other Section 42 properties that you either own or manage in Wisconsin? And a second question, sort of follow-up, what makes you feel that you will be more successful than prior owners at this location in maintaining a quality site?
First of all, we've developed about a little over 1,700 units here in Wisconsin, Ohio, and Michigan. Of those, about 1,000 units have been rehabs. Closest would be Milwaukee. We just finished 300 unit senior acquisition rehab, senior property there. I think the dollars needed to rehabilitate this is going to be the key. And the tax credits is one vehicle that will allow us to do that, to rehab the property, to modernize the property and bring it to the market at a price point that will be very desirable.
All right. A specific question then on one of your documents you submitted, you indicate The tenants will pay the following utilities, and you list electric at $13 for a two-bedroom and, three-bedroom and $11 for a two-bedroom. You don't list anything for hot water. You don't list anything for air conditioning. I assume the tenants are going to have to pay those?
Heat and water are provided.
Okay, but not air conditioning? That's
Each unit will have an air conditioner.
Right.
It goes into their utility, electric utility allowance. There isn't a rent, there isn't a charge for the air conditioning.
Okay, but if they use it, they'll have to pay.
They'll have to pay for
more
it,
than
yeah.
11 or 13 bucks.
Correct.
In the summertime, anyway.
And those are utility estimates put out by HUD. We didn't come up with those. Those are put out annually from HUD. That's where those numbers come from.
In the 1,700 rehab units that you've got in multi-states, have you had examples where the projects have been unsuccessful or less than robust?
No. The acquisition rehabs, and this is a little different animal because it's vacant right now. The majority of the units are vacant. Typically, an acquisition rehab, our tenant base is in place, and we rehab with our tenant base. Those are, they're fairly easy to do. On the new construction, you run into a little more risk because you have the lease-up risk. And yes, we've had projects that didn't lease up the way we wanted them to. They did lease up, but sometimes, for various reasons, the lease-up can be a little slower than anticipated.
Do you have a formula that you use in terms of either on-site managers or local overseers or?
There'll be an on-site manager. Part of the community center has an office there. There'll be an on-site maintenance person. Whether they live on the property or not, we can't require them to. We like them to. Typically, we'll have a couple tenants in this size project that are kind of the eyes and ears off hours, that they know should there be a problem, who to contact.
Well, obviously, you probably have anticipated my next concern or question, is that as a developer, you come in, you do your thing, and you make your money up front, and within a short period of time, whether it's 15 years or
Right.
less, the property changes hands a time or two, and it starts this slide into a big mess again for the city. And you're gone and happy, but we're stuck with it.
Yeah, that may happen. It could happen with any rental property that turns over and you have a poor owner, a poor manager. During the time that we're involved with the project, we have annual replacement reserve that are put away. We also have an investor that buys the tax credit that is worried about their investment because at the end of the day, they want to get a return. So there are a number of factors that are in place to help prevent anything happening during the period of time that we're involved with the property.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Nuno.
Great, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you very much for your interest in our city. This, I think, is a very viable property for this, and hopefully if it does go through, it'll be a good investment for you, and consider looking at Beloit again for other projects. My one question is, have you or do you plan on, during the process, meeting with the other people in that neighborhood to get their input and their feeling on this project?
On the single-family homeowners in the area?
Yes.
We do in cases we have not planned something at this point. Our plan was to try and shelter them as much as possible from the property by adding that berming and the landscaping along our common border.
That was a nice picture.
Anything else? Councilor DeForest.
I would just like to comment that while I, in general, am opposed to adding more apartment complexes, this certainly seems to be a good solution to an existing problem for the city. And as the costs continue to mount for this particular unit, it makes a lot of sense to me to move forward in this way. Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, I would just like to add a comment to piggyback on Councilor Nuno's that I think at some point as we decide to move forward with this, I think it'll be a good idea to just have a meeting with the neighbors, kind of let them know what's going on. Otherwise, they're going to give us a call. And so it's good, especially in this area, to make sure you have the neighborhood support, as you move down this road. I think it'll be a lot easier road for you than to go in there and start building, and they're wondering what's going on, and no one told them.
Actually, before they build the community center or those additional buildings, it needs a PUD.
Okay.
So which we've told them already. So at that point, notices would go out
Okay.
to the
All right.
resident.
Thank you. Anybody else, any questions, comments, or concerns? That's okay.
Question, I know this seems real petty. Is the plan to have sidewalk run along, I'm trying to think what road that is. I want to make sure there's sidewalks, not only within the complex, but running along the street there. Yes,
Along which street?
Freeman, because I'm guessing there'll be lots of foot traffic from there to some of the amenities that are nearby.
Yeah, at this point, there is not a sidewalk, but that certainly can be
Could we
added.
request that you consider that,
Yeah,
please?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I believe there is a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Passes 6-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 11B, please.
Item 11B is a resolution authorizing a temporary change in the Housing Rehabilitation Loan Program.
Staff presentation, Ms. Christensen, please.
As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we are having more demand for rental loans and less demand for the homeowner loans. We had a request in that actually expired at the end of 2010 where we allowed more rental loans out of the CDBG money, but we're still seeing a demand into 11 and 12. And so what we're asking is that you make a temporary change in the housing program manual to allow a rental housing borrower to receive 2 loans in a 12-month period. The current standard is 1, to allow 50% and to allow 50% of the available CDBG and home funds to be loaned to for rental housing rehab, and currently that percentage is 25%. Also included in the packet was all the loan and grant programs that are available through housing services to try to make sure that properties get upgraded. And so we are obviously recommending approval of that proposed rule change.
Thank you. Is there a motion for approval? Motion by Haynes, seconded by Johns. Counselor, comments or discussion? Counselor Johns.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to add an amendment to B, where it reads $25,000 for a multifamily and $8,000 for each additional unit over 2 units. If we can max that out at a total of 8 units, I believe that brings it to $71,000 per year.
I would second that.
Okay.
We do it per loan, so are you talking 8 units per loan, or are you talking 8 units per what?
Per loan,
8 units per loan.
because they only get 1 loan per year.
Well, the change would give them 2 loans in a 12-month period per rental borrower, so, I mean, I'm looking at the resolution, so I'm not what the staff report said, so I'm trying to figure out where that goes in there. Yeah, I have it, but in terms of the resolution, what, are you saying up to 2 loans and 8 units for each rental borrower?
I'm just not seeing the 2.
While you look at Counselor Vandenberg.
Well, the proposed rule right here says 2 loans, and it's also in the resolution. It says 2 loans in a 12-month period, and to allow up to 50% of available CDBG and home funds to be loaned for rental housing rehab loans.
Let's go with $71,000 per loan.
Okay. Counselor Vandenberg, before we go to that amendment, the discussion?
All right, well, Ms. Christensen, is the thinking here to make this pool of money more accessible to a larger portion of the pool of money accessible to a landlord who's interested? Is that the thrust of this?
The 50% is just to make it available to more landlords. If you leave it at 25%, even if you do 2 loans per year, you're only going to have a handful of landlords that you're going to be able to help. And so we were trying to go to 50% because that's where the demand is right now. And it doesn't increase the amount of the loan. I mean, if you cap the loan, it just makes, instead of, loaning 5 landlords money, you might be able to loan 10. So it allows you to do more projects, more loans by going to 50%.
But if you let them get two, doesn't that,
That's per rental borrower, so we'll just use names, just so it's easier. You know, Doug Cash can have two, Matt Finnegan can have two, Ron Cash can have two. So you would have, each person could have two, but by increasing the dollar amount, we can allow more landlords to do that, to have the two, versus limiting it with the 25%.
and then are there sufficient, in your mind, sufficient either credit checks or financial barriers or safeguards so that we have a good opportunity to get paid back?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Councilor DeForest.
I was just requesting clarification. So is the amendment limiting to 8 units per borrower or per loan, or are we resorting instead to the $71,000 cap per loan?
If I did my math right, it would be 71,000 on a rental rehab, and that would be for 8 units. So per loan, and they could have 2 per year. Julie needs calculators.
I think it's 73, but.
It might be. Did it on the fly.
Because it's 25 for 2 units, and then if you take the remaining 6 times 8 is 48, and then if you add that up, it's 73.
Mr. President, if the council's desire to do that, I think we would rather have a dollar cap rather than talk about the number of units, because it's possible someone could have more units to rehab but be able to do it if they had the 73,000. So rather than say you can only do 8 units, I'd rather put the dollar amount. And if is 73 the amount?
Yeah, I think it's 73.
Round it to an even 75, which would seem to make a little more sense.
Because it won't add another
administering
unit.
this. Put the cap at 75, and that way you wouldn't get into a situation where 1 or 2 large owners would take the entire pot to do a huge complex.
And what I just wrote down, jotted down based on what you said, Heidi, was just on the resolution itself. Now therefore be it resolved that the Housing Rehab Loan Program is hereby modified to allow rental borrowers to receive up to 2 loans in a 12-month period, comma, to allow up to 50% of available CDBG and home funds to be loaned for rental housing rehab loans, and to cap the amount of a single rehab loan to $75,000 or $73,000, whatever that dollar amount is.
This is your amendment, Councilor Johns. Are you comfortable with that?
I'm thinking.
I mean, 73 is the
While
amount
you're
when.
thinking, let me go. While you're thinking, let me go to Councilor Noonan. Councilor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I not speak for Councilor Johns, but my thought with this, and when we brought it up during the last council meeting, was to try to distribute these funds out to more borrowers or more properties. And so what I hope we might consider is maybe making it, as opposed to upping it to 75, going with 70,000. Still a very great incentive to try to get them to work on their properties. There wouldn't be very many of these at that level, but if there are, we would get more bang for our buck in more neighborhoods throughout our city.
Yeah. Okay, 70,000.
Okay.
There's my motion.
Okay.
Okay.
What she said.
I don't even know what she said right
Do you
now.
want me to read it?
She has it. Okay.
Got her back. Carol's
Okay.
leaving us.
Carol's reading. So, okay, Councilor DeForest, and then we'll have either Carol or Mrs. Christensen read back exactly what the amendment states, and then we can take it from there. Councilor DeForest.
I'd just like to make a comment that part of the issue might be, I know we're trying to help out smaller landlords here instead of the huge apartment building landlords, but I also just like us to keep in mind that some of the units that these landlords take on need substantive work. You know, they need lead abatement, and we have lead grants to help with that.
Yeah, lead is separate, so they can still get a lead grant.
I want to make sure that we understand that it might be very costly to rehab a 4-unit, more than we might even anticipate. And so I guess I just want to throw that out there, that just to be mindful of that.
There is a max on the 4-unit no matter what, because it's 25 plus 8 and then 8. So that's already, you know, if you got a 4-unit, all this really does is not allow someone to come in and take a loan for a 20-unit complex. So it doesn't change that allowable amount for a 4-unit.
Okay.
So Councilor DeForest, if I understand you correctly, you're saying we had the 73 on the table, then we had 75 on the table, and now we have 70 on the table. Are you saying you're in favor of leaving it at 75?
That would be the most common, what I know about the properties, mostly 4 units, so they very good have 5 or 6 units, so I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that that sentiment isn't,
Okay. Carol, could you read it back, please?
Well, as Julie stated, and I just added on to the last paragraph of the resolution, a comma, and to cap the amount of single-family rehab loans to 70,000.
A single rehab loan.
Single rehab loan to 70,000.
I didn't know if you had that.
Okay, there's an amendment. That was it. And it was a second. It was amended by Councilor John, seconded by Councilor Newton. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Am I done? Now, motion on the resolution to approve. Moved by DeForest.
Second.
Second by Johns. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution passes. And before we go to item 12, this was Carol's last meeting. We were supposed to make it easy for her. And, you know, the last item on the agenda is what it took the most time and the most confusing. Item 12 is a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Johns. Is there second by DeForest? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Cheryl.